Got it. Here's a 1,000 word expanded version of part 1 of your Wa Karen Demanded My Cabin story, written in a detailed, narrative style with richer description, dialogue, and pacing so the scene breathes. I'd been looking forward to this weekend for months. Work had been relentless, my phone a constant stream of emails and urgent messages that somehow couldn't wait until Monday. The thought of my cabin, the quiet, the creak of the old wooden floorboards, the scent of pine and lake water drifting through the open windows, had been the carrot dangling in front of me through endless conference calls. It wasn't just a place to escape, it was mine. My grandfather had built it decades ago with his own hands, and after he passed, it came to me. The cabin wasn't fancy, but it was solid, and every nick and scratch told a story I could still hear in his voice. By Friday afternoon, my car was packed to bursting. Groceries, fishing gear, my old battered guitar, and even the dog's favorite bed took up every spare inch. The drive out was smooth, the sky streaked in gold as the sun started to set behind the tree line. By the time I reached the gravel road that led to the cabin, I could already feel my shoulders loosening. The air was cooler here, cleaner. The world felt like it had turned down its volume. I had just unlocked the front door when I saw her. Standing there on my porch like she owned the place. Perfectly pressed khaki shorts, oversized sunglasses perched on her head, a phone clutched in one manicured hand. I didn't recognize her immediately, but the way she looked me up and down, like she was assessing if I belonged here, made my stomach tighten. "Hi," I said cautiously, setting my bags inside the door. "Can I help you?" She smiled, if you could call it that. It was more of a practiced upturn of the lips, like she'd been told it was polite to smile but didn't really see the point. "Oh, you must be the owner. Renter. Whatever." She waved a dismissive hand. "I'm Karen. I'm on the WA board." I had to resist the urge to laugh. My cabin wasn't in any WA, never had been. "I think you might be mistaken. This property's been in my family for." She interrupted with a sharp little laugh. No, you're mistaken. This whole area is part of the Lakeview Shores Community Association now. We've consolidated. It's all much better organized." I stared at her. Organized was not exactly high on my list of weekend goals. Before I could explain that my land was private and not part of whatever power trip she was on, she leaned forward, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "So, here's the thing. I need the cabin this weekend. My sister's flying in from Florida, and I promised her a lakefront getaway. The place we usually rent fell through, and since you're, well, clearly just one person, it would be so much better use of the space if we had it." It took me a second to process what she'd just said. "Wait, you want me to give you my cabin for the weekend?" Her tone shifted into something sugary, like she was doing me a favor. "Oh, not give. We'll call it community sharing. I can even let you use my husband's kayak sometime." I almost choked. "No, absolutely not. This is my cabin. I came here to use it." Her expression hardened instantly, the fake politeness evaporating. "I don't think you understand how things work around here. When the WA says something is for the community, we expect cooperation. You can't just hog resources." I was too stunned to answer for a moment. "This is not a community resource. This is private property. My private property." Karen crossed her arms, her lips pressing into a thin line. "You're being very unneighborly. And frankly, I think you're violating some of our guidelines. The board will have to hear about this." She pulled out her phone and began tapping furiously, as if documenting my refusal. I didn't care. "Do whatever you want," I said, stepping inside and starting to close the door. That's when she raised her voice. "If you shut that door, I'm calling the police." I froze. "On what grounds?" She gave me a look that could peel paint. "Trespassing. You're not authorized to be here." For a moment, I was caught between disbelief and fury. "I have the deed in my bag inside. You're seriously going to waste police time over your made-up rules?" Some of us take community governance seriously, she said, chin high. I'll give you one last chance to vacate. That did it. I shut the door firmly, locked it, and went to unpack. I could hear her outside, muttering into her phone, her voice rising and falling in exaggerated outrage. I half expected her to leave after a few minutes, but she didn't. Instead, I heard the crunch of gravel as she moved to the end of my driveway, clearly waiting for backup. 15 minutes later, sure enough, flashing lights appeared through the trees. Two sheriff's deputies pulled up, stepping out slowly. I greeted them on the porch, my dog wagging at their heels. One of them, a tall man with a weathered face, spoke first. We got a call about a trespasser. That would be me, apparently, I said dryly. This is my property. I've got the deed inside if you want to see it. Karen swooped in before they could answer. Officers, thank goodness you're here. He's refusing to leave the community cabin, and we have rules. The taller deputy held up a hand. Ma'am, slow down. This cabin, who owns it? He does not, she said, pointing at me like I'd stolen her purse. It belongs to the community. I went inside, grabbed the folder I kept with important documents, and came back with the deed. This is my name. Here's the property line map. It's been in my family since before there was even a Lakeview Shores. The deputy took the papers, glanced at them, then looked at Karen. Ma'am, this isn't HOA property. You don't have any authority here. Karen's face went red. Well, maybe not technically, but we have expectations. Expectations aren't laws, the deputy said flatly. You can't demand someone leave their own property. She sputtered for a few seconds, then tried a different tactic. You don't understand. If everyone just does whatever they want, there's chaos. The deputy gave her a look that suggested he'd heard more than enough HOA drama for one lifetime. This isn't chaos. It's private property. You need to leave. She stood there, fists clenched, breathing hard like she was trying to summon the energy to win an argument she'd already lost. Finally, she spun on her heel and stalked off down the driveway, muttering something about writing this up for the next meeting. The deputies handed my papers back and apologized for the disturbance. As their cruiser pulled away, I let out a long breath I hadn't realized I was holding. My weekend had barely started, and already I had a story that would make my friends think I was exaggerating. Except I wasn't. That was just part 1. Do you want me to keep going with the same tone for part 2 so it flows seamlessly into the rest of the story? Sure. Here's a 1,000-word expanded version of part 2 of that story, keeping it in a natural storytelling tone. By the time I saw the police SUV crunch its way up the gravel driveway, I'd already braced myself for the kind of ridiculous conversation you only get in HOA land. My little log cabin sits well outside the HOA's jurisdiction, technically in the woods past the last paved road, but it hasn't stopped a few nosy officials from trying to claim it for their own. And today's self-appointed sheriff was Karen from down the road, the kind of woman who wore a visor indoors and had a permanent squint of moral disapproval. She was pacing at the end of my driveway, arms folded so tightly I thought she might snap her own elbows. When she saw the officer step out, she pointed at me like she'd just spotted a fugitive. That's him, she announced, as if she'd been rehearsing. He's illegally occupying the property I reserved for this weekend. The officer, a tall guy with the calm demeanor of someone who's been through every small town drama imaginable, looked from her to me. Sir, can you tell me what's going on? I explained, briefly, that this was my cabin, that I owned it outright, and that no one could reserve it without my consent. The officer nodded slowly, then turned back to Karen. Ma'am, do you have any documentation showing this property belongs to you, or that you've rented it? Karen thrust a crumpled piece of printer paper at him. Right there. Proof. The HOA's weekend retreat schedule. It looked like something she'd typed in Word with Times New Roman and no margins. Under Saturday-Sunday, it simply read, Karen's Cabin Weekend. I couldn't help myself, I laughed. Probably not the smartest move, but it just slipped out. Sir, is that not your name on the schedule? The officer asked, keeping his tone neutral. It's not my name at all, I said. And even if it was, the HOA has zero legal authority over my property. This cabin isn't inside their development. Karen gasped like I'd just confessed to smuggling endangered ferrets. It is in the HOA. We voted on expanding the boundary last month. You can't just vote to expand onto someone else's land, I said. That's not how property law works. The officer's eyebrows flicked up just slightly, his version of a belly laugh, I think, but he stayed professional. Ma'am, do you have the deed or any record of ownership for this cabin? Well, no, she admitted, but I booked it. I told everyone at the HOA meeting I was taking it this weekend. I have guests coming in an hour. At this point, I decided the best defense was a little offense. Officer, I can grab the deed from inside if you want proof. He nodded. That would be helpful. When I returned with the folder, Karen tried to peer over his shoulder at the paperwork like she could magically rewrite it with sheer willpower. The officer read the name, mine, and the description of the property. He handed it back and sighed. Ma'am, this cabin is clearly his. You don't have the right to enter it or stay here. Karen's face went crimson. You don't understand. He's being unreasonable. This is for the community. We can't have people hoarding resources. It's my home, I said, not a community picnic basket. You're selfish, she snapped. The HOA is trying to bring people together, and you're just hiding away like some hermit. The officer, bless him, stayed cool. Ma'am, unless you have a rental agreement or the owner's permission, you need to leave. She stared at him like he'd just betrayed her personally. So you're siding with him. Over the entire HOA. I'm siding with property law, he replied. Karen's meltdown entered its next stage, volume escalation. This is harassment. You're harassing me. I'm calling the HOA president right now. She whipped out her phone and stomped a few feet away, muttering into it. The officer turned to me. She's not going to let this go quietly, is she? He said in a low voice. Not a chance, I replied. She's the kind of person who'll send an angry email to the mayor over the color of a stop sign. The HOA president apparently didn't pick up, because a minute later she came stomping back, phone still in hand. Fine. But this isn't over. We have bylaws. Again, the officer said patiently, your bylaws don't apply here. Karen crossed her arms. We'll see about that. For a moment, I thought she might actually try to push past me into the cabin. But she finally spun on her heel, muttering about selfish cabin hoarders, and stalked toward her car. The officer lingered long enough to give me a sympathetic smile. If she comes back and tries to enter without your permission, call us right away. I thanked him, and he left. I figured that was the end of it. Oh, how naive I was. Not an hour later, I heard a car horn outside. I looked through the window, and there she was again, this time with two other HOA members, a man in golf shorts and a woman in a sun hat the size of a satellite dish. They all got out, holding folding chairs and coolers. I stepped onto the porch. What now? Karen put on her brightest fake smile. We're here for the barbecue. There's no barbecue, I said. And even if there was, you wouldn't be invited. She laughed like I'd told a charming joke. Oh, you. Don't be like that. We brought burgers. No, I said, you brought trouble. Golf shorts chimed in. Look, we don't want to make this a big thing. Just let us hang out on the property for a few hours. It is a big thing, I said. You can't just show up uninvited and decide my home is a public park. Karen pouted. You're really going to deny us a little community time. We have the right to assemble. I shook my head. Not on my porch. When I refused again, Karen's smile finally cracked. You're going to regret this. The HOA can make your life very difficult. Try me, I said, and went back inside. They lingered for another 10 minutes, loudly discussing how antisocial I was, before finally leaving. I spent the rest of the weekend half expecting them to sneak back in the middle of the night, but thankfully, the only noise was the wind through the pines. By Monday, a letter arrived in my mailbox. Sure enough, it was from the HOA, filled with faux legal language about noncompliance with community spirit and failure to participate in neighborhood initiatives. I couldn't help laughing, half at the absurdity, half because I knew they were about to waste a lot of energy chasing something they could never enforce. I wrote back with a single sentence: I am not a member of your HOA. Cease further communication. Haven't heard from them since, but I still keep the deed in a frame by the front door. Just in case Karen decides her next weekend is coming up. Do you want me to also write part 3 so the story has an even more dramatic payoff? That could bring it full circle.